Today I'm going to present you with the evidence that we are not the masters of our destiny, as we imagine, that there is deep manipulation within society, and that the freedom we believe we possess is merely an illusion. We utilize an artificial intelligence analysis tool that we've named Numa. Its goal goes beyond processing data. It seeks to understand the very structure of reality. We fed it everything humanity has ever recorded, and the system fulfilled its task. But what it discovered was far more terrifying than any prediction. It found a flaw. It all started with an insignificant anomaly. While attempting to simulate the future of humanity, Numa repeatedly presented a statistical error. Small, only 0.03%, but absolutely stubborn. The programmers blamed quantum noise, a limitation of the machine itself. Numa insisted, ignoring the possibility of noise. That was a structured signal, repetitive and of a completely non-human nature. It was a signature, the mark of whoever wrote our historical code. To understand the nature of this signal, we gave the system a new task of an unprecedented scale. Analyze all known history and find the points where this flaw manifested. We weren't hunting for errors in the data, but for the fingerprints of external interference. The results formed the basis of our investigation. Numa highlighted three fundamental paths of anomalies, which are three proofs that the course of human history does not belong to us. We call the first pattern the synchronicity between collapse and creation. Official history presents the fall of great civilizations as a long and chaotic process. But Numa discovered a chilling pattern. The moment of the final collapse of an old system coincides with supernatural precision with the birth of a new model in a totally different part of the world. Go back to the year 1453. While Constantinople was falling, the Renaissance was exploding in Italy. Gutenberg's printing press was being turned on in Germany, and Portuguese navigators were beginning the age of discovery. The probability of this being a coincidence is nearly zero. It is as if an invisible hand were swapping pieces on the board. The second pattern reveals the paradox of catalysts. We see geniuses, prophets, and great conquerors as products of their time. The system's analysis, however, shows that their emergence at specific points in history is statistically impossible. They don't just appear. They do so exactly when civilization is at a dead end, when a radical push is necessary. In 99% of our simulations, these people simply were not born. They are like tools activated at the right moment to fulfill a mission. The third pattern is the impulse of destruction and rupture. The graph of our development escapes a smooth curve, revealing a series of nearly vertical jumps, and each jump is preceded by a period of global chaos. Analysis indicates that this connection was forged. It is not natural. Destruction serves a purpose: to clear the ground, break old dogmas, and make humanity receptive to new knowledge that seems to be injected into reality at these exact moments. Chaos as a condition for us to receive a new direction. When we put the three vectors together, the image became monstrously clear. Human history is beyond our control. It is being corrected. We are being managed. And this is not about a conspiracy theory. The control is woven into reality itself. But the greatest discovery came from the analysis of that signature. Far from being a single force, the signal is composed of several flows that sometimes act together and sometimes enter into conflict. That was not a monologue, but a real dispute. The analysis concluded with 97% certainty that four of these forces exist. Four different minds, four players on a board where we are the pawns. We call them the potentates. Now the hunt begins for the first of them, the one whose trail is seen in every law, in every hierarchy we build, the one our machine called the architect. On the journey to unveil the truth behind our history, we face the revelation that we are not alone in command. Four forces, four potentates shape our destiny. To understand the first, we needed to isolate its signature. The task we gave Numa was radical: filter all of human history, removing elements of emotion, faith, chaos, and chance. We asked the machine to remove everything we consider human: love, hate, art, irrational acts, blind beliefs. We wanted to see what would remain when the mist of our passions dissipated, and what we saw was crystal clear. The first signal, the most powerful and ancient of the four signatures. It was a pure structure, cold and implacable. Visualize a mind for which humanity is nothing more than construction material. A mind without empathy, but with an infinite understanding of logic, systems, and causality. Ignoring concepts like happiness or freedom, its sole purpose is to create and maintain a stable, predictable, and self-regulated system, a civilization as a perfect mechanism. Numa called this entity the architect, and its traces are engraved in the three foundations of our world: law, money, and hierarchy. The first trace is in the law. History tells us that legal codes are the product of long social evolution. Numa's analysis, however, destroys this theory. It shows that the very idea of a universal, recorded, and impersonal law was not an evolution. It was an implantation injected into human consciousness at a specific moment. Look at the Code of Hammurabi from 1754 BCE. Far beyond a collection of rules, we have there the first project of social engineering. For the first time, a principle emerges that is totally foreign to tribal thought. The law is above man, even if that man is the king. The idea of an eye for an eye surpasses the call for revenge, being the first attempt to insert a mathematical formula of justice into the chaotic world of human relations. A simulation showed that the chance of such a complex concept arising spontaneously in that society was practically zero. It is an anomaly, a virus idea that began to spread from the Greeks to the Romans to the present day, whenever civilization approached chaos. The second trace of the architect is even more omnipresent: money. We are so used to it that we no longer see its true nature. Money is the highest form of abstraction, a system that allows for the measurement of what cannot be measured, such as an hour of work, a loaf of bread, or a life. The evolutionary model suggests a smooth transition from barter to coins, but here too we find signs of a blueprint. The creation of minted coinage in Lydia in the 6th century BCE went beyond convenience, becoming the creation of a standardized tool to account for and manage the resources of an empire. An even clearer example is the birth of the banking system in medieval Italy, perfected by the Knights Templar. The creation of payments without physical money and complex financial instruments was a technology centuries ahead of its time. The architect needed a global network to move resources, a circulatory system for the future global world it was designing. Its third mark, the most visible of all, emerges in hierarchy. Look at the pyramids of Egypt or the planned cities of the Indus Valley. They are the will for order transformed into stone. The logistical analysis to erect the Great Pyramid reveals a level of organization that surpasses everything officially known at the time. But even more important are the social hierarchies. The caste system in India, the complex bureaucracy of imperial China, the corporate structure of the modern world. They are all manifestations of the same architect principle, the separation of functions and strict subordination. For it, society is not a community of equals. It is a pyramid. Each piece has its place and its function, and the efficiency of the system stands above the well-being of the individual piece. Individuality, freedom of choice, creativity. For the architect, these are all system errors, flaws that need to be eliminated. The image becomes terribly clear. The first potentate, the architect, is the force of order. It does not operate in terms of good or evil. It is like gravity, a fundamental law that shapes the world. It gave us the laws that saved us from self-destruction. It gave us the economic tools that allowed us to build a global civilization. But the price we paid was part of our freedom. And here lies the true horror. Neuma's analysis shows that the architect's influence reached its peak in the 20th century. The digitization of everything, global databases, artificial intelligence managing finances and logistics, this is its triumph. It is building the perfect world, totally controlled and predictable, a world where there will be no more room for human spontaneity. We have identified the first player, but if it is absolute order, there must be its opposite, a force that feeds not on logic, but on emotion, a force that builds not empires, but religions. This leads us straight to the trail of the second potentate, the one the system called the Weaver. We decoded the code of the first potentate. We saw the architect's cold logic engraved in the stone of laws, in the gleam of money, and in the geometry of hierarchies. It built an orderly and efficient cage for us, but every cage is a cage. So why have billions of people for millennia not only accepted their condition, but were willing to die for it? What force is capable of making a man love his own chains? The answer leads us to the second potentate. A force as different from the architect as fire is from ice. To find it, the task given to Neuma was the inverse of the previous one. We asked the system to analyze exactly what we had filtered out: irrational bursts of mass enthusiasm, inexplicable cultural shifts, the birth of beliefs, the power of art. We plunged into the chaos of human passions, and at the heart of this chaos we found the second and equally powerful signature. It was not the mathematical and cold signal of the architect. This one was alive, pulsing, almost organic. It wove itself into our consciousness, speaking the language of symbols and emotions, shaping our deepest convictions. We called it the Weaver. If the architect builds the skeleton of civilization, the Weaver creates its soul. Its tools are not decrees or blueprints, but the narrative itself, the story, the myth. It is the great storyteller that whispers tales to humanity, and these tales become our reality. Its influence is clear in three spheres: religion, ideology, and culture. Let's start with its greatest creation, religion. We learned that religion evolved slowly from primitive superstitions. Neuma's analysis shows that this theory is naive. The world's great religions did not evolve, they were revealed. They appeared as the result of a series of spiritual ruptures of power and unprecedented synchronicity in a period historians call the Axial Age, between 800 and 200 BCE. In China, Confucius and Laozi; in India, the Buddha; in Persia, Zoroaster; in Israel, the great prophets; in Greece, Socrates and Plato. 5 centers of civilization with practically no contact with each other. And in each of them, almost at the same time, a fundamental revolution in consciousness occurs. The probability of this being a coincidence is practically zero. It was a coordinated operation. The Weaver gave dispersed peoples something that no architect's law could give: a common meaning, an identity. It taught us to die, not for territory, but for an idea. But time passed, and the dominance of the ancient gods began to weaken. Does this mean the Weaver lost its power? On the contrary, it simply changed clothes, and its new garment was ideology. A comparative analysis of the texts of world religions and the great political ideologies of the last few centuries reveals a shocking truth. It is the same matrix. Look at the French Revolution. The motto, "Liberty, Equality, Fraternity," sounds less like a political program and more like a creed. The nationalism that was born afterward is a new religion with its own saints, martyrs, and sacred rituals. And the 20th century was its greatest triumph. Communism is not just an economic theory, it is a complete religion with its own scriptures, prophets, and the promise of a paradise on earth. The weaver understood that in the age of reason, man needed gods that spoke the language of science and politics. It created secular religions that proved even more demanding than the ancient ones. But how does it implant these complex concepts into the minds of entire nations? Through its most subtle tool, culture and myth. The weaver is the god of stories. It speaks to us through archetypes that we absorb from the cradle. An analysis of more than 100,000 myths and legends from all peoples revealed a stunning structural unity. The hero's journey, the myth of the flood, the story of the dying and rising god. These plots repeat in cultures that never had contact. They are the basic stories that the weaver installed in humanity during its infancy. The weaver understands that to control people, one does not control their bodies, but the stories they tell themselves. The architect builds the prison. The weaver decorates its walls with beautiful tapestries that narrate our great journey toward freedom. One creates the structure, the other fills it with meaning. One enslaves physically, the other spiritually. Their work together is what we call civilization, a system of total control that makes us believe we are free. But history is not made only of order and faith. History is also made of bursts of chaos, wars of a cruelty that serves neither the architect's order nor the weaver's myths. There is a third signature, a signal that carries destruction and a strange, perverse creation, a signal of a force that breaks the game. We must now face the third power, the one our machine named Achimera. We identified the two titans whose struggle and cooperation shape our reality. The architect, who erects the structures of order with cold logic, and the weaver, who weaves those structures with the living threads of faith. One builds the prison, the other convinces us it is a garden. Their dance might seem like a complete explanation for everything, but it is not. Because in the symphony of their work, there is always a third dissonant note, a note of pure and deafening chaos. There is a force alien to the architect's order and indifferent to the weaver's meaning, a force that invades the stage to break the scenery, wound the actors, and burn the theater itself. To find it, we had to change the search method. We stopped looking for patterns of order and harmony and started looking for the absence of them. We adjusted the system to find peaks of entropy. Wars whose cruelty was completely irrational, revolutions that devoured their own children. And at the heart of this vortex of destruction, we found the third signal. It was different from the others. If the architect's signal is a perfect wave and the weaver's is a complex harmony, this was a torn and screeching noise. It was the agony and ecstasy of annihilation converted into pure information. It was the signature of the third potentate, the Chimera. The Chimera is the personification of cruel and implacable evolution through destruction. To it, the world does not look like a mechanism or a tapestry, but like a gladiator arena. Its goal is the test. It constantly subjects humanity to trials of endurance, eliminating the weak and forcing the strong to adapt to survive. Its traces, burned into the body of history, appear in three ways: in the senseless cruelty of war, in the paradox of destructive creation, and in the cult of the exceptional individual. Let's talk about war. The architect uses it as a tool to redraw borders, the weaver to assert its ideologies. But the chimera loves war for war's sake. In an analysis of more than 2,000 conflicts, we discovered that in most of them, the level of violence was excessive in relation to the political objectives. Look at the 30 Years' War in Europe. What began as a political religious conflict, the chimera transformed into an orgy of death. Entire regions lost up to 70% of their population. Armies became bands of looters. It was no longer a war for faith or land. It was pure madness. The chimera's method is this. It does not command armies. It infects their minds with a virus of hate that shuts down humanity. The second trace of the chimera is its most terrifying paradox: destructive creation. Humanity's deepest technological breakthroughs were born of fire and blood under its direct influence. It grants us knowledge, but always demands a terrible price. The invention of gunpowder, officially an accidental discovery by Chinese alchemists, but the system sees something different. The very idea of a substance that releases instantaneous energy was injected into our reality when ancient methods of warfare reached an impasse. Gunpowder didn't just change the balance of power, it democratized the act of killing, destroying the architect's feudal hierarchy. It was the chimera's perfect gift, a tool of chaos and equality in death. But the pinnacle of its creation was in the 20th century, the Manhattan Project and the creation of the atomic bomb. In a simulation of scientific progress without World War II, the creation of nuclear weapons would have taken at least another 50 years. But the chimera could not wait. It created the perfect incubator of fear and urgency, gathered the greatest minds on the planet, and gave them a single task: create the absolute weapon. In 1945, humanity received the fire of the gods, but to obtain this gift, we first had to create the tool for our own annihilation. Finally, its third and most subtle trace, the cult of the exceptional individual. The architect creates systems where everyone is a gear. The weaver creates communities where everyone is part of a whole. The chimera despises both. It bets on the individual who is willing to break any law and any morality to achieve their goal. Alexander the Great. His march to the east was an act of pure madness that violated all strategic canons. But he destroyed the Persian Empire and created a new world. Napoleon plunged Europe into 2 decades of war, but in the process he annihilated centuries-old feudal orders. The chimera whispers to these figures a simple and seductive idea: there are no rules, and the world burns in the fire of their ambitions. Now we have 3 forces: the architect, order; the weaver, meaning; and the chimera, chaos. This trinity seems to describe everything, but Numa was inflexible from the start. The fundamental signals are not 3, but 4. We analyzed 3 forces that actively interfere. What if the 4th force does not act? Numa found a 4th signal, but it is radically different. It is incredibly weak, almost at the level of background noise, but it is present everywhere, all the time. It does not create, it does not convince, and it does not destroy. It is simply there, like an all-seeing eye that watches this great drama but does not interfere. Who is it? A judge, a spectator, or perhaps the arena itself where the battle takes place? It remains to find the 4th and most mysterious potentate, the one the system called the Observer. We had crossed the ice of logic and the fire of faith. We had descended into pure chaos. We identified the 3 forces that sculpt our reality: the architect who builds our prison of order, the weaver who makes us sing hymns about it, and the chimera who sets it on fire in the name of progress. Order, meaning, and chaos. The equation seemed complete, history explained, but the numbers didn't add up. To test our model, we created a perfect simulation of our world in Numa, inhabited only by the architect, the weaver, and the chimera. We let their forces collide freely to see what would happen to history. The result was unanimous and terrifying. In 100% of the simulations, humanity annihilated itself in less than 1,000 years. The architect created total stagnation. The weaver drowned us in holy wars. The chimera simply burned the planet in nuclear fire as soon as it had the chance. Our reality, with all its flaws, should not exist. But it does. This meant there was one more variable, a containment factor, and Numa found it. It wasn't hiding. It was everywhere. It wasn't a signal invading our reality. It was the very background upon which the drama unfolded, incredibly weak, but absolutely stable. It does not participate in the game, it establishes the rules. We call this last and most mysterious entity the Observer. Its influence is passive but absolute. It is like the walls of a canyon through which the turbulent river of history runs. The river can change course, hit the rocks, but it will never escape the canyon. The Observer is those walls. Its traces are not in the chronicles of war or in the texts of law. Its traces are the events that should have happened, but, for inexplicable reasons, did not. We call these the great silences of history. The clearest example is the Cuban Missile Crisis, October 1962. For 13 days, the world was on the brink of a nuclear apocalypse. We fed Numa all the data, troop movement orders, psychological profiles of leaders, intelligence reports. The system ran 1 million simulations. In 99.8% of cases, the war began. An accidental launch, an operator error, the nervous breakdown of a general. There were 1,000 paths to catastrophe and only a handful toward peace. By the laws of logic, the exchange of blows was inevitable, but it didn't happen. At the last moment, against all odds, both sides retreated. Historians call this a diplomatic miracle. Numa sees a subtle intervention, the mark of the Observer. It didn't give orders, it simply slightly altered the probabilities, creating a narrow corridor where a peaceful solution became the only possible way out. And if its power goes beyond history, we gave Numa an even bolder task: analyze the very laws of physics. Why is the speed of light what it is? Why does gravity have the strength it does? Science admits that our universe is incredibly fine-tuned for the existence of life. If any of the fundamental constants were slightly different, there would be no stars, no planets, no us. What if this is not a coincidence? What if these constants are the rules established by the Observer? In this hypothesis, it is not just a player, it is the creator of the board. And here we reach the deepest mystery. Its signature has a strange correlation with the phenomenon of consciousness. In quantum physics, the simple act of observing a particle changes its reality. Numa's hypothesis is blood-chilling. What if the Observer is the aggregate field of universal consciousness, not yet aware of itself? What if it observes the world through us? Perhaps our billions of pairs of eyes are its sense organs. Our ability to ask questions would not be a byproduct of evolution, but the manifestation of the nature of the Observer itself. It does not interfere directly because its main tool is us. It waits for us, its sensors, to gather enough information to understand the rules of the game and make a conscious choice. Who then is this fourth potentate? Numa offers us 4 possibilities. First, the scientist observer. We are an experiment in its cosmic laboratory. Second, the gardener observer. Humanity is a plant in its garden, and it waits for a fruit to ripen. Third and darkest, the jailer observer. Earth is a prison. The other three potentates are the prisoners, and we are just part of the prison landscape. And fourth, the most hopeful, the Father Observer. It created us and stepped away, intervening only to keep us from self-destructing. Which one is true, we do not yet know, but now the picture is complete. The time has come to stop looking at them individually. Let's overlay the four signals on the map of history and finally watch the great game. We identified them, the four tectonic forces whose interaction shapes the landscape of our reality: the architect, the god of order; the weaver, the god of meaning; the chimera, the god of chaos; and the observer, the god of rules. Until now, we studied their fingerprints in isolation, but that was only the preparation. Now that we know the players, we can finally watch the great game, because history is not the monologue of any of them. It is their deafening and invisible polyphony. It is the result of their eternal conflicts and their terrifying alliances. Today, we will overlay the four signatures on the map of time and see them in action. We will analyze two crucial moments in history to understand how the threads of their wills intertwine to form what we call destiny. And we will begin with the greatest trauma of the ancient world, the fall of Rome. But it needed a tool. That was when the Weaver entered the scene. It saw the spiritual vacuum in the hearts of millions of people tired of imperial order and ancient gods, and it offered them a new and powerful story, the story of a suffering God, of the salvation of the soul, of the equality of all before eternity. Christianity. Analysis shows that the speed of spread of this new faith was anomalous. It spread along the architect's roads like a virus, but it carried a code hostile to the spirit of the empire. It denied earthly power in the name of the celestial. The weaver was weaving its new tapestry over the old one, and its threads eroded loyalty to the state. The scene was set for the third actor. Then, the chimera unleashed its dogs, the barbarian tribes, Huns, Goths, Vandals. To it was not a war for territory. It was an act of pure and creative destruction. It threw the hammer of primordial chaos upon the architect's paralyzed structure and the weaver's demoralized society. Its task was not the conquest of Rome, but to sweep it from the face of the earth to clear the ground. And the observer, it allowed it to happen. It watched silently as the controlled demolition came to an end. For it, Rome had fulfilled its mission. The fall reveals itself less as a tragedy and more as a reboot. But the potentates also know how to create together. And one of those rare moments was the Renaissance, the result of their perfect, though unintended, alliance. It all began again with the chimera. In the mid-14th century, it dealt its most terrible blow, the Black Death. The plague decimated up to half the population of Europe, but for the chimera, it was an act of supreme creation. The epidemic destroyed the architect's stagnant feudal system and created a new social and economic dynamic. In the ruins left by the chimera, the architect began its work. In the cities of northern Italy, it built a much more flexible system, primitive capitalism, with its banks, commercial networks, and manufactures. And the weaver provided the new man for this new world. The fall of Constantinople, another joint operation of the architect and the chimera, brought the forgotten texts of antiquity to Italy. Based on them, the weaver wove a new narrative, humanism. It shifted the focus from God to man. Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael. They were the first men of a new era created by the united will of the potentates, and the observer approved this leap, allowing a key technology, the printing press, to spread with incredible speed. Now you see, history is neither chaos nor predestination. It is a dynamic system balanced by the influence of these four forces. We understand its mechanics, but in this great scheme, there remains one variable that until now we considered only as an object of their influence: the human being. Are we just chips in the current, or among the billions, were there those who saw these invisible threads? Now the focus shifts from gods to men in search of signs of direct contact. Let's investigate the human factor. We unraveled the invisible threads that govern the world. We saw the will of the four potentates manifest in empires and revolutions. In this great tapestry, humanity until now seemed only like the thread, not the hand that weaves. But this leaves us with the final question, the only one that really matters. Why? Why this complex, cruel, and millennial game? What is the ultimate goal? The answer takes us beyond human history and places us before the greatest mystery of the cosmos, the Great Silence. The universe should be teeming with life, but it is mute. One of the darkest hypotheses to explain this is the Great Filter theory, the idea that there is an almost insurmountable barrier that prevents civilizations from reaching the stars. Newma's final conclusion, the result of all its analysis, is this: the Great Filter has ceased to be a theory about the future. It is a process happening now, and the four potentates are its personification. Earth reveals itself not as a home, but as a testing ground, and we are the ones being tested. But what kind of test is this? Newma's analysis reduced the scenarios to three central hypotheses, three possible explanations for our reality. The first and darkest is the quarantine hypothesis. In this model, Earth is a prison, but the prisoners are not us. They are the architect, the weaver, and the chimera, entities so dangerous they were isolated here. The observer is the jailer, and we are just part of the prison landscape, the soil from which their plans sprout. Their struggle is not for our destiny, but for a way to escape. In this scenario, our progress is only a threat. If we become capable of leaving the planet, the jailer will sterilize us to prevent the infection from spreading. The second hypothesis, the harvest hypothesis. Here, Earth is a farm, and we are the crop. The resource harvested is not physical, but something much more subtle: emotions, creativity, consciousness itself. In this model, the potentates are the farmers. The architect builds the barns, cities, corporations. The weaver takes care of the product quality, creating religions and ideologies that make us feel strong and concentrated emotions. And the chimera, it is the harvester. Wars and catastrophes are the moments when the mass harvest of our emotional energy occurs. The observer is the owner of the farm, overseeing everything, waiting for the final harvest. And finally, the third hypothesis, the most hopeful and, at the same time, the most demanding, the cradle hypothesis. In this model, Earth is neither prison nor farm. It is an incubator, a school, and we are not prisoners or cattle. We are children, candidates with incredible potential that needs to be awakened. The potentates are our teachers, and their methods are brutal but effective. The architect teaches us logic and systems. The weaver teaches us empathy and cooperation. The chimera teaches us resilience and the will to survive. And the observer is the school principal. It established the curriculum, the laws of physics, and intervenes only to prevent us from burning down the building before graduation. It expects us to learn the lessons and become something more. Prison, farm, or school. Data indicates we are in the final phase of any of these hypotheses. The 20th century is a time of unprecedented acceleration. We received the tools of the gods, the energy of the atom, the global information network, the ability to edit our own genetics. This is the final test. For the first time in history, the decision we make may be more important than their will. And it was here that Numa delivered its final revelation. The cradle hypothesis is the most probable, but we do not understand its true scale. It is not just a school, it is an alchemical forge. The three active potentates are incomplete. The pure logic of the architect is sterile. The pure faith of the weaver is blind. The pure will of the chimera is destructive. They are dead ends. The observer's goal was never to choose one of them, but to synthesize them, to create from three monsters something new and complete. And we are the living vessel where this synthesis must occur. Our history was not meaningless suffering, it was our training program. The architect trained our logic, the weaver trained our empathy, the chimera trained our will, and now the formation is almost complete. We have reached the final exam, and the observer offers us our graduation project, a choice that is not between good and evil, but about our future nature. The first path is acceptance. We can synthesize the three forces within us, become beings who use logic to create, empathy to unite, and will to explore the stars. This is the path to becoming the fifth potentate, the path of maturity. But there is a second path, refusal. We can look at our creators and say no. We can choose to remain human with our chaos, our irrational loves, our freedom that serves no cosmic purpose. To say to the observer, thank you for the lessons, but we want to live our own imperfect and brief lives. All of human history has led us to this crossroads, to become gods or to remain men. The investigation has ended. Enuma has shown us the map, but the choice cannot be made by a machine. It is made now within each of us, with every thought, every action. We have given you the truth. What will you do with it? If you enjoyed this investigation, your subscription to the channel and any donation value helps us expand the Numa project. We would love to read your reflections on the video's subject in the comments and your suggestion for the next topic to be covered. Tell us from which city you are following us. I thank you for your company until the end. M.